This explainer isn't your typical story about overnight success. It's really not about waking up one morning with a sudden burst of inspiration or finding that perfect motivational quote that changes everything. Instead, we're going to examine the true architecture of consistency. We'll look at the deeply grounded, entirely unglamorous mechanics of what it actually takes to build a life from absolutely nothing. This is Sanjay's path through rock bottom. And as we'll see, the true foundation of discipline is rarely built in comfort.
Sanjay hated his mother. Not in some loud, explosive way, though. It was that quiet, cold, settled kind of resentment that only years of accumulation can really produce. The kind of hate that lives heavy in the chest and comes out as total silence at the dinner table, as it turned back. He blamed her for everything, for the neighborhood they lived in, for the school he went to, and most intensely for his father not being there. In Sanjay's mind, if she had just been different, his father would have stayed, so he punished her for it daily. He spent his time drifting with the wrong people simply because they asked absolutely nothing of him. They didn't look at him with that painful combination of love and exhaustion that he saw in his mother's eyes every single day.
And then, his mother died. You know, rock bottom doesn't always announce itself. There's no dramatic, cinematic score playing in the background. It just simply arrives on an ordinary morning when you open your eyes. Suddenly, Sanjay was left completely alone in a small apartment with his younger sister. There was no income, there was no plan, there was just the sudden, crushing weight of reality he had spent his entire life avoiding.
Nobody is coming. Think about the weight of that realization. The person who was quietly, invisibly holding his entire world together was just gone. The safety net he didn't even realize he had was completely stripped away. Whatever was going to happen next, whether they ate, whether they kept a roof over their heads, was entirely, terrifyingly up to him. He didn't feel a surge of motivation in that moment. He felt something much harder. He felt the absence of choice.
Which brings us to the first lesson: showing up out of necessity. Sanjay needed money immediately, so he walked into a nearby restaurant and took the most unglamorous position they had available: washing dishes and clearing tables. The work nobody wanted, for pay that barely covered what they needed to survive. But he took it. And his first real lesson began right there. It wasn't in a classroom. It was in the act of showing up every single day, whether he was tired or not, and whether the work felt meaningful or not.
There is a massive contrast between the stories we tell ourselves about discipline and the cold reality. We often buy into this myth, right? Waiting for motivation to strike, waiting for the right mindset or the perfect conditions before taking action. But while people wait for that, nothing actually gets built. Sanjay's reality was different. He had no acceptable alternative. Real consistency, in its most fundamental form, isn't a motivational achievement. Sanjay didn't become consistent because he magically found his passion. He became consistent because looking at his sister's face meant that stopping simply wasn't permitted.
Section 2. The lie that changed everything. Burning the bridge. A few months into washing dishes, a position opened up at a better establishment. Higher pay. The kind of money that would genuinely change his sister's future. But it required him to be a cook, and Sanjay had never cooked professionally a day in his life. He sat across from the owner in the interview, and he did something that could have completely destroyed him. He looked the man in the eye, and he lied. He said he had experience. He got the job, and he had exactly 2 weeks before anyone found out the truth.
Make it impossible to fail by making it impossible to retreat. The crucial point here is understanding what Sanjay actually did in that moment. It's so easy to just call it reckless or dishonest, but in reality, Sanjay identified something he desperately needed, and he deliberately burned the bridge behind him. He removed every possible safety net. He made it impossible to go back and gracefully withdraw. The only direction available was forward, right into the terrifying process of becoming capable enough to actually justify the lie. Let's look at how those 2 weeks unfolded. Day 1 was the lie. By day 7, Sanjay was in a state of urgent learning. He couldn't afford classes, obviously, so during his shifts he obsessively watched the other cooks. He asked questions disguised as curiosity rather than ignorance. Then he'd go home exhausted and practice in his own small kitchen. He learned the way a person learns when failure carries a genuine, devastating cost. And by day 14, he was thrust into a public cooking competition at the restaurant to prove his skills.
The outcome of that crucible reveals a pretty hard truth. Capabilities are discovered when comfort is removed. The story most of us tell ourselves about our own abilities is built in comfortable conditions, conditions that honestly lie to us. They make us believe our limits are much closer than they actually are. When you take away comfort, when you make the stakes real and failure genuinely costly, the human capacity for effort expands dramatically. Sanjay didn't just learn to cook in those 2 weeks, he discovered what he was actually capable of.
Next, the crucible and the truth. Character over technique. Sanjay didn't win that competition. He had worked harder in 2 weeks than most people do in a year, and he had built genuine skill, but he was up against people with years of proper training. And close wasn't first. In that moment facing defeat, he could have felt utterly humiliated. He could have believed that his circumstances had forever sentenced him to failure. Instead, he chose a path defined not by technique, but by character.
This shows the power of unstrategic honesty. He went directly to the owner and he just told the truth. He confessed that he had lied in the interview, that he had taught himself in 2 weeks, and he explained exactly why he did it. He asked for a chance to simply outwork everyone else. The owner offered him a position as an assistant, not because the lie was acceptable, but because the willingness to learn at that pace, under that immense pressure, was undeniable. His honesty, delivered when it was no longer strategic, revealed a level of character that was frankly worth more than polished technique.
What followed was not some quick movie montage. It was years. The long game. 10,000 ordinary days. It was years of showing up as the least experienced person, learning without ego, and doing the difficult, unglamorous daily work that true mastery actually requires. Over time, Sanjay became genuinely skilled. His sister grew up with stability. He built a real life. But there was still the unresolved weight, understanding his mother. Despite this newfound stability, there was a heavy weight living in his chest since the day his mother died. A lingering shadow of all those years when he had given her nothing but silence and blame. At some point, looking back at his own long, hard journey to provide for his sister, Sanjay finally began to fully understand what his mother's life had actually required.
You can literally trace this profound emotional shift. He looked back at the resentment of his youth, the silence, the coldness, the belief that she was the problem. And finally, he saw the truth. Awe, grief, the recognition of quiet mental toughness. He realized that his mother had been raising 2 children alone, doing the hard thing every single day without reward or gratitude. She had been the exact embodiment of the consistency he had just spent years forcing himself to learn. He hadn't seen it when he had the chance to tell her, but that realization permanently shaped the man he became.
Let's transition into 5 lessons on consistency, the mechanics of grit. From this raw, grounded journey, we can extract the true mechanics of grit. And these aren't your typical polished motivational speaking points. They are hard-won truths born from absolute necessity. Let's walk through the 5 specific lessons from Sanjay's story.
Lesson 1. Burn your bridges. The single most powerful thing Sanjay did was remove the option of retreat. Giving yourself a plan B isn't creating a safety net. It's writing yourself a permission slip to stop trying when it gets hard. Real, absolute effort only unlocks when failure carries an unavoidable consequence.
Lesson 2. Stop the self-pity. Sanjay had every valid, objective reason to feel sorry for himself. An absent father, a difficult childhood, the sudden loss of his mother. Those circumstances were very real. But self-pity is not rest, it's a useless exhaustion that produces absolutely nothing. Every minute spent rehearsing your unfair circumstances is a minute you aren't spending building your way out of them.
Lesson 3. Focus on what you control. Sanjay couldn't undo his mother's death or his father's absence. None of that was available to him. What was available was the gap of today. Whether he showed up to wash dishes, whether he practiced cooking at night, whether he asked a better question. The absolute necessity of your life is to ignore the unchangeable past and live entirely in the space of what you can control right now.
Lesson 4. Embrace change as the point, not the problem. Every massive positive shift in Sanjay's life came disguised as a severe disruption or threat. His mother dying, the desperate need to provide, the lie in the interview. Discomfort isn't something to avoid. Discomfort is the door. It is the exact pressure required to force real growth.
And lesson 5. Hard work is non-negotiable. This is just the simple truth. There is no shortcut through the middle. Sanjay didn't get good because he had some innate natural talent. He became skilled through repetitive, consistent hours. The hard work is not the price you pay to get to the good part of your life. The hard, repetitive work is the good part. It's where the person you are becoming actually gets built.
So here is that framework one more time. Burn your bridges, stop the self-pity, focus on what you control, embrace change as the point, and accept that hard work is non-negotiable. Again, this wasn't born from toxic positivity. It was born from pure, unavoidable necessity. It's a blueprint for survival that inevitably turns into a blueprint for mastery.
Which brings us to the person on the other side. Peace through effort.
This is the ultimate result of all of this. Sanjay didn't just find a career to pay the bills. He found a quiet, profound peace. The kind of peace that only comes from knowing exactly who you are, because you've built something real with your own two hands. He carried a heavy weight, and he didn't put it down.
Not just the outcome, the person. That's what consistency actually gives you in the end. It's not just about the outcome you achieve, the title you earn, or the stability you create. It's about the person you must inevitably become to survive the fire. So think about it. What kind of person are your daily choices building right now?